Frank Miller wiped sweat from his brow as he tended to his hydroponic garden in the colony's agricultural dome. New Horizon was still being terraformed, making the domes necessary for growing earth crops. After finishing his work, he noticed something odd. The Jackson family's dome across the way remained dark for the third straight day. "Hey, Frank," called Melanie Woods as she passed by with her supply cart. "Have you seen the Jacksons lately?" "No," Frank replied, frowning. "I was just wondering about that myself. Their kids haven't been at the colony school all week. Little Amy and Ben, they'd never miss. Something's not right." Frank nodded, concern growing. "I'll check on them." After cleaning up, Frank walked to the Jackson home unit. The silence was unsettling. He knocked several times before using the emergency override, a feature all colonists agreed to in case of accidents. The home was empty, beds unmade, as if the family had left in a hurry. "Colony security, this is Frank Miller reporting a missing family," he said into his comm unit. Within hours, Security Chief Olivia Ramirez confirmed the Jacksons weren't the only ones missing. 3 more families had disappeared, all with children under 13. "No signs of struggle," Olivia explained as they examined security footage. "But look at this." The grainy footage showed a faint shimmer outside the Jackson home 2 nights ago, like air distorting around an invisible object. "Cloaking technology?" Frank asked. "Nothing we've seen before," Olivia replied. "I sent this to Central Command." 2 days later, representatives from Earth's Space Force arrived. Commander Daniel Warren looked grim as he addressed the colony's emergency meeting. "What I'm about to share is now being announced across all human colonies," he began. "The missing families are part of a pattern. We've identified the responsible party, an alien species called the Vordax." Gasps filled the room. First contact with an alien civilization had occurred only 15 years ago, and relations with the various species were still developing. "The Vordax are abducting human children for what they claim is scientific research," Commander Warren continued. "Their researchers apparently believe human offspring are non-sentient developmental stages, similar to the larval forms of their own species." "That's ridiculous," Frank shouted. "They didn't even try to communicate." "The Vordax operate on different ethical principles. They've been studying several species this way. Our diplomatic corps discovered this after connecting patterns across multiple colonies." Olivia stood up. "How many children are we talking about?" "At least 73 confirmed cases across 12 colonies," Warren replied. "We've demanded their immediate return, but the Vordax refuse. They insist the research is too valuable and claim the children are being treated humanely." The room erupted in anger. Parents clutched their children closer, while others shouted demands for military action. "What's being done to get them back?" Frank asked when the noise died down. "The Space Force has dispatched our fastest diplomatic vessel to their homeworld," Warren said. "If that fails, other options are being prepared." That night, Frank couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Amy and Ben Jackson, wondering if they were scared, if they understood what was happening to them. The thought of children trapped in alien labs made his blood boil. The next morning, as Frank checked the news, he saw reports from across human space: protests, military preparations, families in panic. An official statement from Earth's government promised all necessary actions would be taken to recover the children. The galaxy was about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. Nothing was more dangerous than threatening their young. Captain Elaine Summers stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Stargazer, her posture rigid as the ship approached the massive orbital station of the Vordax High Council. The station hung like a gleaming silver seed pod in space, surrounded by sleek vessels that resembled flattened teardrops. "Final approach, Captain," reported Navigator Ryan Powell. "They've assigned us Docking Bay 7. "Acknowledged," Elaine said. She adjusted her formal diplomatic uniform, acutely aware that this meeting could determine the fate of dozens of human children. "Ambassador Wilson, are you ready?" Ambassador Gregory Wilson nodded, his weathered face serious. as ready as one can be when trying to explain to an advanced alien species why kidnapping children will lead to war. The diplomatic team consisted of 5 humans: Captain Summers, Ambassador Wilson, Dr. Patricia Lawson, a xenobiologist, Lieutenant Eric Gonzalez, security, and Dr. Alan White, child development specialist. They had rehearsed their presentation exhaustively, hoping to appeal to the logical nature of the Vordax. As they entered the station, Elaine noted the clinical atmosphere. Everything gleamed with metallic precision. The Vordax themselves were tall, thin beings with gray-green skin and large, multifaceted eyes that reminded her of insect eyes, though their bodies were humanoid in basic structure. The lead Vordax scientist, who introduced himself as Chief Researcher Colvex, led them to a circular meeting chamber. "We welcome representatives of humanity," Colvex said through a translation device. His voice was oddly melodic despite the mechanical translation. "Though we are confused by your emotional distress regarding our standard scientific protocols." Ambassador Wilson stepped forward. "Chief Researcher, we appreciate your willingness to meet. However, I must be clear. You have abducted children from our colonies, an act we consider among the most serious crimes possible." The Vordax representatives tilted their heads in synchronized confusion. "Abduction implies taking sentient beings against their will," said another Vordax official. "Our studies indicate your offspring are pre-sentient developmental phases, requiring guidance and control from mature specimens." Dr. White bristled. "That's completely incorrect. Human children are fully sentient from birth." "Unlikely," Colvex replied. "Our observations show limited cognitive capacity, physical dependency, and rudimentary communication skills." "Those observations are being misinterpreted through your cultural lens," Dr. Lawson interjected. "Human children develop differently than Vordax larvae." For the next 2 hours, the human team presented evidence of children's sentience, emotional capacity, and developmental patterns. They showed videos of children creating art, solving problems, and expressing complex emotions. Dr. White explained how human parent-child bonds were fundamental to human society. The Vordax remained unmoved. "Your presentation is noted," Colvex said. "However, our research must continue. The subjects are well cared for according to their biological needs. We have extensive data yet to collect." Captain Summers stepped forward, abandoning diplomacy. "You don't understand what you've done. Where I come from, people who take children face the most severe consequences. Are you threatening military action over research specimens?" asked a Vordax council member, multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber lights. "They are not specimens," Elaine said, her voice dangerously quiet. "They are our children. And yes, humanity will go to war over this." "Illogical," the council member responded. "War would result in significantly greater loss of life than our controlled study." As the meeting concluded without resolution, Ambassador Wilson made one final plea. "Return the children immediately. This is your only warning." Back aboard the Stargazer, the team sat in dejected silence. "They truly don't understand," Dr. Lawson said. "Their own reproductive process involves metamorphosis. Their young aren't sentient until final form." "What now?" Lieutenant Gonzalez asked. Captain Summers touched her communication panel. "Now we inform command that diplomacy has failed, and God help the Vordax when human parents come for their children." As the Stargazer departed, Elaine watched the alien station shrink on the view screen, knowing that the next human ships to arrive wouldn't come in peace. Admiral John Harrison stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council. The vast chamber, designed to accommodate beings from over 30 spacefaring civilizations, hummed with translation devices and environmental adjustments. Floating platforms held delegates who required different atmospheres, while others sat in the tiered seating that surrounded the central speaking floor. Harrison, a veteran of both the Mars conflict and the Jupiter Belt expansion, wore his formal military dress with rows of service medals that glinted under the chamber's lights. His weathered face revealed none of the fury he felt within. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council," he began, his deep voice carrying across the chamber. "I come before you today not as a diplomat, but as a messenger. The United Earth government has authorized me to deliver our final position regarding the Vordak's abduction of human children." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Sith representative, a crystalline being that communicated through light patterns, flashed a series of concerned pulses. "The Vordak's High Science Ministry has submitted extensive documentation showing these specimens are being maintained in optimal biological conditions," stated the Vordak's representative, Senmore. "This research is being conducted within established interspecies scientific protocols." Harrison's jaw tightened. "There are no protocols that permit the abduction of children. Not by human standards. Different species have different reproductive methods," countered Senmore. "Our studies clearly show human offspring lack the neural complexity of adults. They require constant supervision and instruction." "That doesn't make them non-sentient," Harrison replied. "It makes them children. Our children." The chairperson, a Tellurian with phosphorescent skin patterns, raised a limb for order. "Admiral Harrison, does Earth intend to take action that would disrupt galactic peace?" Harrison looked directly at the Vordak's representative. "I am here to deliver a simple warning that your scientists have failed to comprehend. You locked up human children. That's a death sentence." The translation devices struggled with the idiom, causing confusion among many delegates. The Murek's representative, a feline-like being with elaborate facial markings, leaned forward. "Clarification requested," the Murek said. "Are you stating that the children are being executed?" "No," Harrison explained. "I am saying that abducting human children has triggered a protective response in our species that the Vordaks have gravely underestimated. Throughout our evolutionary history, humans have been willing to sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to protect their young." Professor Ganley, a respected cynoanthropologist from the Sishan Alliance, rose to speak. "If I may add context for the Council, humans have an unusually strong biological imperative to protect their offspring. Their historical records show countless examples of individuals facing certain death to save not only their own children but any child in danger." "Precisely," Harrison nodded. "This isn't a diplomatic position. It's a biological reality. Every human in space is prepared to risk everything to rescue these children." The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. The Vordak's representative remained unmoved. "Your emotional response is noted," Senmore stated. "However, threats will not accelerate our research timeline." Harrison shook his head slowly. "This isn't a threat. It's a prediction. I've been authorized to inform the Council that Earth has mobilized its entire fleet. We've recalled our ships from every sector of space. Protective facilities are being established for non-human civilians in our territories." The chairperson's skin flared bright orange in alarm. "Admiral, is Earth declaring war?" Harrison's expression remained grim. "Earth isn't declaring anything. I'm simply explaining what happens when you take human children." As Harrison left the chamber, Professor Ganley hurried to catch the Vordak's representative. "You must return the children immediately," the professor urged. "The human response isn't hyperbole or diplomatic posturing. They will come for their young, and nothing in your defensive capabilities has prepared you for humans protecting their children." Senmore's multifaceted eyes shifted slightly. "Fascinating. Perhaps we should add this protective behavior to our research parameters." As the Vordaks departed, Ganley shook his head sadly. They still didn't understand what was coming. Susan Carter stared at the holographic images of children projected above the table. Among them was her son Kevin, his school photo showing a gap-toothed smile and unruly brown hair. He was only 12 when the Vordaks took him. Each time she looked at his image, her resolve hardened. "We've identified 78 children confirmed in Vordak's custody," she told the assembled group. "Based on the facility schematics provided by intelligence, they're being held in Research Station Zeta 9, orbiting the third moon of the Vordak's homeworld." The meeting room in the New Horizon Colony Administration Building had become the unofficial headquarters of what people now called the Parents Coalition. What had started as a support group had transformed into something more focused and more dangerous. "My team can provide tactical support," said Commander Heather Jones, one of several military personnel who had joined the coalition. She wasn't supposed to be sharing classified information, but like many in the Space Force, she found it impossible to remain neutral. "The fleet will be in position within 14 standard days, but they're still hoping for a diplomatic solution." 14 days is too long, said George Patel, whose twin daughters were among the abducted. "Each day they're held is another day of trauma." Susan nodded. "That's why we've been working on an alternative approach." She gestured to a man sitting quietly in a corner. "This is Neil Rogers, former Special Operations. He's been helping us develop a potential rescue mission." Rogers stepped forward, his face bearing the distinctive scar of someone who had served in the Mars conflict. "I've been analyzing the data we have on the research station. The Vordax rely heavily on automated systems and have minimal security personnel. They never expected to be targeted." "You're talking about a civilian rescue mission?" Commander Jones asked, her expression concerned. "That would be extremely risky. More risky than waiting while our kids are treated like lab specimens," Susan countered. "Besides, we have something the military planners don't." She tapped her communication device, and a garbled audio transmission played. A young voice came through the static. "Mom, Dad, if you can hear this, we're okay. There are 26 of us in Section C. The aliens don't watch us much." Kevin found a way to access their communication system. The room fell silent as everyone recognized the voice of Amy Jackson, one of the first children taken from New Horizon. "They're organizing themselves," Susan said proudly. "My Kevin has always been good with computers. Apparently, he's teaching the others how to access basic systems." Meanwhile, in Research Station Zeta 9, Chief Researcher Tel Nak reviewed the latest behavioral reports with growing confusion. "The specimens have developed a hierarchical social structure," the assistant researcher reported. "The older ones appear to be instructing the younger ones in specific tasks." "Fascinating," Tel Nak replied. "Their primitive social bonding must be a survival mechanism. Note how they share their nutritional supplements despite our individualized feeding protocols." "There's more," the assistant added hesitantly. "Several monitoring devices in Section C have malfunctioned simultaneously. The maintenance logs show no evidence of system failure." Tel Nak dismissed the concern. "Likely coincidental. Increase observation frequency but maintain distance. We don't want to disrupt their natural behaviors." The Vordax researchers failed to notice the small figure watching from an air circulation vent. 12-year-old Kevin Carter carefully memorized the control panel layout before silently retreating. Back in the maintenance shaft, he rejoined a group of waiting children. "Did you see it?" whispered 8-year-old Zoe from the Alpha Centauri colony. Kevin nodded. "I saw how their security systems connect. We need to get to level 5. "What about the little kids?" asked Maya, who at 14 had become responsible for caring for the youngest captives. "We stick to the plan," Kevin said firmly. "No one gets left behind. Tell everyone to keep collecting the metal scraps from the meal containers. Sam's team needs to finish the tools today." As the children dispersed, Kevin touched the makeshift communicator he'd assembled from parts stolen over weeks of careful planning. He hoped his mother had received their messages. Either way, they weren't waiting to be rescued anymore. Back on New Horizon, Susan Carter looked at the determined faces around the table. "We have 12 days before the fleet arrives," she announced. "Our children are counting on us to be ready when they make their move." Kevin Carter pressed his back against the cold wall of the ventilation shaft, holding his breath as 2 Vordax researchers passed below the grate. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands remained steady. 3 weeks in captivity had changed him. He was no longer just a 12-year-old boy from New Horizon. He had become something the Vordax never anticipated. A leader. Clear, he whispered once the aliens moved on. 6 children emerged from hiding spots along the shaft. Maya, the 14-year-old who had become his second in command, carried a makeshift satchel filled with their improvised tools. "Everyone remember the plan?" Kevin asked, looking at each child. They nodded solemnly. Even 8-year-old Zoe understood the importance of timing. "Sam's group is in position at the environmental controls," Maya confirmed. "The little ones are safe with Raj in the storage bay." Kevin checked the device he'd assembled from stolen components, a crude timer coupled with a signal disruptor. "When this goes off, we'll have about 4 minutes before their systems reset." The children had spent weeks studying the Vordax patterns. The aliens were methodical to a fault, following the same schedules every day, treating their human specimens with clinical detachment. They never imagined that the children were watching them just as carefully. Inside the main laboratory, Chief Researcher Telmac was recording observations. "Specimen behavior indicates remarkable adaptability to captivity," Telmac noted. "The smaller specimens remain dependent on the larger ones, confirming our hypothesis about pre-sentient developmental stages." An alert flashed on the monitoring panel. "Atmospheric fluctuation in Section C. Investigating," an assistant reported. Telmac dismissed it with a gesture. "Likely another equipment malfunction. Schedule maintenance after observation period." The Vordax had grown accustomed to minor system glitches over the past week. What they hadn't realized was that each glitch was actually a test, children learning the limits and responses of the station's systems. At precisely 14:27 station time, Kevin activated his device. Throughout the research station, lights flickered and security doors cycled through emergency protocols. Environmental alarms blared, causing the Vordax to rush toward their emergency stations, exactly as the children had predicted. "Now," Kevin commanded. Maya's group surged from the ventilation shaft, racing toward the communication hub. Meanwhile, Sam's team disabled the environmental locks on Section D, where the youngest children were kept. Kevin led his team directly toward the security center. They had 4 minutes to execute the most dangerous part of the plan. Inside the control room, 2 startled Vordax turned as the doors slid open. They hadn't expected to see 5 human children carrying makeshift weapons fashioned from medical equipment and meal trays. "What is this behavior?" one asked, reaching for the alarm. Kevin threw the metal projectile he'd been practicing with for days. It struck the Vordax's limb with surprising force, causing the alien to recoil. The other children swarmed forward, moving with the coordinated precision they'd rehearsed in secret. "Restrain them, don't hurt them," Kevin ordered. Despite everything, the children had agreed. They wouldn't become like their captors. Using strips of bedding material, they bound the confused researchers. The Vordax, with their limited understanding of human strength and agility, had never considered that children could overpower them. "I'm in their system," called Zoe, who had slipped behind a control panel. Despite her age, she had quickly learned the color-coded Vordax interface by watching through vents. "Which button sends messages?" "The flashing green one," Kevin directed as he secured the door. "Type exactly what I tell you." Across the station, similar scenes unfolded as children executed their carefully planned uprising. In the medical lab, Maya's team had barricaded themselves in, using the Vordax's own equipment to broadcast interference patterns that jammed internal communications. Telmac arrived at the security center to find it locked from within. The surveillance feed showed an impossible sight: human offspring operating complex equipment, communicating strategically, and systematically taking control of section after section. "Impossible," Telmac whispered. "They're presentient. This level of coordination cannot exist." But the evidence was undeniable. Through the communication system came a child's voice, clear and unwavering. "This is Kevin Carter of New Horizon Colony. We've taken control of research stations 8 and 9. And we're ready to come home." Lieutenant Lisa Garcia studied the holographic display of the Vordax research station. The 3-dimensional projection rotated slowly, showing both the exterior defenses and the internal layout. Red dots indicated Vordax personnel, while blue dots showed the locations of human children based on the information they had transmitted. They'd managed to secure 4 sections, she explained to her rescue team. But the Vordax have sealed off the central hub and are bringing in security forces from their homeworld. The 12 members of Special Tactical Response Team Delta listened intently. They were the best extraction specialists in the human fleet, chosen specifically for this mission. Each wore the matte black combat suit designed for stealth operations. "Our window is closing," said Sergeant Ben Foster, checking his non-lethal restraint equipment. "If those kids lose control of the communications array, we lose our advantage." Lisa nodded, "which is why we're launching immediately. The main fleet is still 8 hours out, but Admiral Harrison authorized our early deployment." The team's dropship detached from the stealth frigate Northern Star, its engines running dark as it approached the research station. Inside, Lisa checked her neural link to the station's systems. The children had done something remarkable. They'd created backdoors into several key systems. "I'm getting a direct feed from Kevin Carter," she announced. "They've barricaded themselves in sections C through F, but can't reach the younger children in Section A. That's our priority target." As the dropship silently docked at an emergency airlock, Lisa received another transmission. "The Vordax don't understand what's happening." Kevin's voice came through, strained but determined. "They keep trying to offer us better food, thinking we're just misbehaving. They don't get that we want to go home." "Hold position, Kevin," Lisa replied. "We're inside. 20 minutes to your location." The rescue team moved through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. The Vordax, despite their scientific brilliance, had limited experience with combat situations. Their security forces were equipped with restraint devices designed for specimen control, not military engagement. Lisa's team encountered the first Vordax security detail near Section B. The aliens hesitated, clearly surprised by the appearance of adult humans in combat gear. "You are interfering with scientific research," one Vordax announced through a translation device. "Depart immediately." Sergeant Foster's response was to activate a neural disruptor, a device specifically calibrated to temporarily incapacitate Vordax nervous systems without causing permanent damage. The aliens collapsed, their limbs twitching. "Path clear," Foster reported, moving to Section A. Meanwhile, in the central laboratory, Chief Researcher Tel Mack watched the security feeds with growing alarm. "This response is disproportionate to the value of the specimens," Tel Mack told the station commander. "We should release them rather than risk interspecies conflict." "The High Council has rejected that option," the commander replied. "These humans are violating our sovereign research facility. Once their emotional response subsides, diplomatic channels will resolve this misunderstanding." Tel Mack's multifaceted eyes shifted nervously. "I don't believe you understand. The specimens, the children, have disabled our primary defense grid. They anticipated our security protocols, and now their adults have arrived." In Section C, Kevin led his group toward the rendezvous point Lisa had designated. They moved efficiently, with older children carrying the youngest and everyone following the evacuation plan they had practiced in secret. "Contact," came Maya's voice over their makeshift communication system. "Adults with black suits in Corridor 7. Kevin felt a surge of hope as he rounded the corner and saw humans in combat gear. A woman at the front removed her tactical helmet. "Kevin Carter?" she asked. He nodded, standing protectively in front of the younger children. "Lieutenant Lisa Garcia, Special Tactical Response. You did good, kid." She smiled briefly before returning to professional mode. "We've secured the children from Section A extraction vessels, are docking now." "All of them?" Kevin asked urgently. "You got all the little ones?" "All 23, Lisa confirmed. "Your intel was perfect. Now we need to move fast. The Vordax fleet has been alerted." As they rushed toward the extraction point, Kevin explained how they had organized their uprising. "We watched them every day," he said. "They thought they were studying us, But we were learning about them too. They never guessed we could understand their systems. Lisa nodded, impressed. The Admiral's going to want to talk to you when we get back. Your transmissions changed everything. Showed us exactly what we were dealing with. As the last child boarded the extraction vessel, alarm sirens blared throughout the station. The main Vordax fleet had arrived, but they were too late. The rescue ships accelerated away, protected by the human fleet that had arrived ahead of schedule. On the command bridge of the flagship Defender, Admiral Harrison watched the extraction vessels dock safely. "Mission complete, sir," reported the communications officer. "All 78 children recovered. Lieutenant Garcia reports minimal casualties, no fatalities." Harrison nodded, his stern expression softening slightly. "Tell the Vordax we're standing down offensive operations. They've learned an important lesson today about humanity." "And what's that, sir?" asked his executive officer. Harrison watched the medical teams greeting the rescued children. "Never underestimate what we'll do to protect our own." 6 months after the rescue, Frank Miller stood in the observation dome of New Horizon Colony, watching 2 children play in the newly constructed park. The dome's transparent ceiling revealed the swirling purple clouds of the planet's atmosphere, a stark contrast to the green grass and colorful playground equipment below. "They're adjusting well," said Susan Carter, who had joined him at the railing. Her son Kevin sat on a bench nearby, helping a younger child with homework. "Better than anyone expected," Frank agreed. "Those kids went through something no child should experience, but they're resilient." The 2 children Frank watched were Ellie and Jason, both 8 years old, orphaned during their captivity when their parents' ship was lost in an accident near Alpha Centauri. After weeks of consideration, Frank and his wife had decided to adopt them. "Kevin still has nightmares," Susan admitted, watching her son. "But during the day, he's focused on his new project." Kevin had become something of a celebrity following the rescue. His leadership during captivity had caught the attention of the Space Academy, which had created a special youth program with him as its first participant. At 12, he was already taking advanced courses in xenobiology and communications. "The Parker Memorial School is opening next month," Frank said. "They want Kevin to speak at the ceremony." The school had been named after Commander William Parker, one of the 3 human casualties during the rescue operation. His sacrifice had enabled the extraction of the final group of children. Across the galaxy, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. The Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity as representatives gathered for the signing of a historic document. "The Children's Charter represents a new understanding between our species," announced the Tellurian chairperson. "It establishes universal protections for the young of all sentient beings, regardless of developmental stage or biological process." Admiral Harrison, now serving as Earth's diplomatic representative, watched as species after species added their signatures. Even the Vordax had sent a delegation, though they remained subdued and isolated from the other representatives. "An impressive achievement, Admiral," said Professor Ganley, the xenoanthropologist who had tried to warn the Vordax months earlier. "From conflict to cooperation in half a standard year." Harrison nodded. "Nothing unites different peoples like protecting children. Even species with radically different reproduction methods can understand the principle." The Vordax representative, not Senmore but a new diplomat named Kelvoran, approached them after the ceremony. "Our science ministry has prepared comprehensive data on our era," Kelvoran said formally. "We now understand that human offspring possess advanced cognitive abilities, despite their physical limitations. Our entire approach to xenobiology has been revised." "Research is valuable," Harrison replied evenly, "but consent and ethics must come first." "A lesson learned at great cost," the Vordax acknowledged. On Earth, the University of New Geneva had established a new department of interspecies ethics with Dr. Patricia Lawson, formerly of the Stargazer diplomatic mission, as its first director. The Vordax incident revealed dangerous gaps in our understanding of each other, she explained to her first class of students. Different species can have fundamentally different views on what constitutes personhood, sentience, and rights. A student raised her hand. Has anyone studied what the children themselves learned from their experience? An excellent question, Dr. Lawson replied. Kevin Carter has actually co-authored a paper on that very subject. The children created their own society while in captivity, one that valued knowledge, protected the vulnerable, and planned strategically for freedom. They demonstrated humanity at its best under the worst circumstances. Back on New Horizon, Frank watched as Ellie climbed to the top of the play structure, hesitated, then leaped confidently into the safety net below, laughing as she bounced. She couldn't even look down from heights when we first adopted her, he told Susan. Now look at her. Kevin walked over to join them, his academy tablet under his arm. The Vordax sent another message, he said. They want me to review their new research protocols for working with humans. Susan put her arm around her son's shoulders. What will you tell them? Kevin watched the playing children thoughtfully. That they need to understand we're not just studying each other. We're building something together now. As twilight fell over the colony, lights automatically brightened in the dome. Families called their children home for dinner, their voices echoing in the peaceful evening air. The crisis that had nearly led to interstellar war had transformed into something unexpected, a deeper understanding between different forms of life among the stars. Frank took one last look at the darkening sky before heading home with his new family. Somewhere out there, other species were looking at humanity with new respect, and perhaps a touch of healthy caution. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans would cross the stars, face any danger, and challenge any power to protect their children. It was simply who they were.